Hey tribe, I'm so excited today because I get to share my very close friend with you. This is Dr. Paula Woodward. And Dr. Paula is a traditional Chinese medicine doctor and also my acupuncturist. And I have to start, Paula, by just saying how very grateful I am for our relationship. Paula saved my life when I was pregnant. I suffered from terrible migraines my whole life. And during pregnancy, I could no longer take the medication, the disgusting medication that I was stuck taking. And she helped me and she healed me and she has continued to heal me. And I haven't had a migraine in a really long time. And so thank you for saving my life, first of all.
Well, it was a co-creation.
And I feel like meeting you was... it was me like stepping onto the precipice of ancient healing modalities, and it really sparked my interest in what's possible using sort of the old norms.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of conversation that we're going to have today, is talking about what it means to be, we were laughing, saying like what it means to be like a modern guru, or a modern yogi, or a modern holistic practitioner of any kind. Our planet doesn't look the way that it used to look when these practices and these traditions were created, but that doesn't mean that they don't apply to our physiology.
Absolutely. We always say physiology hasn't changed in thousands of years, so
yeah.
Same principles still apply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Paula has taught me so much about like disease pathology, first of all, and we in my work in Ayurveda and the work that we do in our group here in the Habits of the Real You, we talk about the gut-brain connection and how our mental and emotional state is tied to our physical state, and all disease, according to Ayurveda, starts in the mind. It manifests in the mind. Mm-hmm. And then makes its way through the body. And before we hopped on, Paula, you were just saying something really interesting about what you're finding with your clients. So if you wouldn't mind sharing what you're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. We have something kind of similar in that we think a lot of the etiology is definitely environment, but also the endogenous factors of the body. So a lot of emotions as well, which of course arise from our life experience, and then whatever mental emotional constructs we create in spite of our experiences. So one of the things that I really noticed with people is, without question, things are always showing up on a mental, emotional, physical, and physiological level. I just noticed I'm nervous sharing this. I just need to take a breath. And so it shows up on all three of those levels regardless. It's just to what degree it's showing up. So what I was just sharing with Carly was, a lot of times when I have younger clients who come in, they might be coming in just because they have back pain or something like this, but I do a full assessment, I do the pulse, I look at their tongue, I ask a ton of questions, and I can see the patterns that are emerging. And a lot of young people, they're not necessarily taking a good look at their mental emotional state at that point, but I'm very clear with them that at the point that they're at now, they might not be noticing a lot of real disharmony, especially physiologically, like a lot of disease pathology arising. But absolutely, without question, if they keep going the way that they're going, 10 to 20 years later, they're going to get to the point where they're really feeling it, and it's going to be an emergency, and they're going to have to do something about it, and that eventually those things turn into very serious chronic pathologies. Yeah. So some people, get it, and some people don't. Oftentimes, I've had people at this point in my practice, because I've been in practice for about 10 years now, I've had people come back years later and say, you said something, you were taking my pulse, you were doing this, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't pay attention at the time, but now guess what's happening is that they're even going to their medical doctor and things are showing up on their blood tests and stuff like that are, highlighting the pattern that we were talking about and stuff. So,
yeah. Well, and for me, two things are coming up that we've gone over in terms of my visits with you. And, one thing is I have always experienced heat. I have a pitta mindset from the Ayurvedic perspective. I'm quite fiery, which can, out of balance, can manifest as like aggressive nature, criticism, self-judgment, and just anger. And actually I've suffered with like rage disorder, postpartum as well. And those fiery tendencies, that's like correlated with liver, gallbladder issues, right? So
yes and no. This is, I think, we're a little bit where it's different. And the thing that I also want to say is there's two sort of major paradigms in Chinese medicine. I mean, there's thousands of years of history, of medical history and philosophy that goes along with it. So the ideas have evolved throughout the years without question, right? But there, during the revolution in the 50s, when Mao came in, they did a lot to disseminate the way that Chinese medicine was being practiced, unfortunately. So they completely tore apart any spiritual aspect to it. They really wanted to modernize and medicalize it and make it very standard, right? So we can look in a book, we can have a diagnosis, we can say, oh, you have these symptoms, well, you have this pathology. I don't practice like that anymore, because in my experience and just in terms of what makes sense to me, the more classical way to look at things, which is not postmodern, not that way, makes a lot more sense. So heat manifests, if you think about the energy in the body, which is we call qi, of course. The qi is very yang in nature. And so we have the yin and the yang, the yin being the cooling factor, the yang being the warming factor. Mm-hmm. Qi is much more yang. And so as the sun rises, the sun being yang, it comes in through the portals, so in through the orifices of the face, right? So the eyes, ears, mouth, nose. And it descends down through the digestive tube. So, and then it goes through this whole circuit and this whole pattern, then it comes back up and out. So heat arises when there is a blockage of that yang energy. I say that because it can actually manifest in any organ. So it doesn't necessarily, it's often associated with liver, because the liver, its physiological mechanism is that it spreads qi in all directions. Mm. So it really helps with that go with the flow, being in flow, ease sense that we can have in life. And when that is angry or pissed off or stifled, or we're not, moving in the direction we want to move in, then the stifling can occur for sure. So that's why it's typically in that paradigm associated with heat. Make sense?
Absolutely, that makes sense. And especially when it comes to feeling rageful postpartum, that's very much a chapter of life when you can't control where you're going. You are stuck. And
totally. And the thing with labor postpartum, I mean, there's a lot going on there in terms of the organ systems. The kidneys get drained, but the liver also stores the blood. Mm. It delivers the blood to the uterus. So it has a lot to do with just the nourishment that the baby receives, right, and the placenta and everything. And when that blood gets drained, because having a baby is draining, right, because we're constantly utilizing our resources, the liver and the kidneys oftentimes need a lot of work. And just the blood in general, that's one of the things that we want to nourish. And the blood is it's more yin I shouldn't totally say that, because it's a nice harmonization of the yin and the yang, the blood is. But when it's deficient, we become very dry. And when a tree gets dry, so the wood element, tell me if I'm going way more into detail than I should be, because I could just talk about this stuff forever. But the liver gallbladder is related to the wood element. And when wood gets dry, it gets brittle and it breaks.
Yeah.
So it can handle much less.
Okay.
Makes sense? In terms of stress. Whereas
absolutely,
a bamboo tree is like flexible, right? It's able to withstand the pressures of the environment and the mm-hmm. wind, and it can bend, but it won't break. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And okay, for anybody who's watching or listening to this, if you, as we come to understand our Ayurvedic Constitution or our dosha or the elements sort of governing our mind body, as with Ayurveda in traditional Chinese medicine, you have these governing elements that support your system. And it's so interesting for me to hear Paula say this, because I'm a wood element. So like all of these things, like she just put so many puzzle pieces in place. It's like, of course, that's the aggravation. And of course, that's how I feel brittle to the point of breaking, because there's a dryness there. So further to this yang deficiency, would you say that just as there's like a blockage that creates this mental anger or mental or emotional manifestation, continuing or creating a pattern of repeating that emotion will then cycle back and create more of a blockage or more of dis-ease?
Yeah, it creates more weakness in the system. Yeah, and then when there's weakness, the body isn't able to reestablish balance and harmony as easily on its own, right? Without the help of, maybe some herbal medicine or supplements or, or pharmaceuticals sometimes, right? If people go that route. So
yeah,
that's when real pathology shows up.
Right. And so this is what Paula's saying about earlier about when we're young, often we can be having anxiety or whatever mental emotional issues, and it doesn't necessarily show up in the body, but that doesn't mean that this repeated pattern of negative emotion is not going to have a physiological after effect.
Absolutely, without question.
So it's important for us at any age to get right in our mental emotional body.
Yeah, and there's a maturation process with that, because I know I had one of my favorite teachers. I saw him. It must have been, I'm 41 now, and I must have been about 33, I think, when I went and had I was taking a 2-year course with him, and I went and had a assessment. And he said a few things to me, and he said, basically you have until you're 40 to shift this pattern. Otherwise it's going to be harder to shift. Yeah. To the point of maybe it being impossible, right? Like when your body gets scarred, there's just certain things that you can't get rid of at a certain point. I used to be such an optimist and think like, no, anything is possible and you can get rid of anything. And I have a much more realistic view on that now that I have aged and my practice has also aged. But sorry, I lost track of your question. I go off on tangents, I apologize.
I have experienced the same, and working with older clients, it's obvious that our samskaras or our repeated patterns or our past traumas or our habits that the longer you repeat them, the harder they are to break. The more deeply seated a false belief is about yourself, or a glass ceiling is that you've set up for yourself.
It exists literally in the tissues. So cellularly in the tissues, it really truly exists there. And that's just physically, that's just a more dense, conformation of energy. Mm-hmm. So to break that up and to free that and to create spaciousness within that tissue, as opposed to just being able to do it when it's kind of just starting as a thought or a story, it takes years of a whole bunch of stuff, physical therapy, mental, emotional therapy, the whole thing.
And I do believe that this time through the 30s and 40s, maybe, or 50s as well, is a beautiful time to begin this focus. For me, it feels like stepping into adulthood, and this is sort of getting to the root of this conversation of because we are living a life where we honor maybe the daily routines of our ancestors or traditional rituals that support a well-nourished body and optimal organ function. Mm-hmm. When you start to do that, you might experience FOMO. You might experience fear of missing out on what the rest of our culture is doing. Yeah. But it's an awakening, right? Because the rest of our culture is perpetuating a cycle of disease.
Absolutely, without question. And I know for myself, I was able to keep up with that to a certain extent. And it's been really in the past sort of 5 years that I'm like, nope, I can't keep going this way anymore. But, one of the most important things for me in terms of, because there's such a compulsion to that, right? To want to be there, not missing out. And it, for me, was very, very visceral and very physical. And I really had to take a look. I had to do a lot of inner work, and I continue to do inner work on why did I care so much? Why was I putting the needs of this feeling and this sensation over what I knew was actually going to nourish my essence? So it's been I've spent a lot of time over the past few years really, I guess, transforming those ego blocks and really getting into relationship with myself. And the more I do that, the more I transform the ego and I get into relationship with myself, and I actually am able to have ego present, because ego is always going to be present no matter what, but working on the behalf of soul and on the behalf of spirit. The easier it is to just be like, yeah, I know exactly what's going to go on there. It's going to be the same, rinse, wash, repeat, rinse, whatever. It's going to be the same thing. I'm not really actually going to miss out on anything. So I'm able to tune in a lot more to, is this actually something I want to do that's going to be nourishing to me, like to go and socialize and be with friends or go to a concert or whatever it might be? Or do I actually just really need a night in?
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing to me actually how much that choice has shifted. And it's just, I don't even question it anymore. It's not even a thing for me, which is lovely, but it certainly wasn't always like that.
I think that it's fascinating that a lot of things really come down to these simple questions that we can ask ourselves. Like, even if you're the type of person that goes out a lot and feeling a little overwhelmed, it can be as simple as putting a sticky note on your door saying, like, which action is the most self-loving? Yeah. And sometimes it is going out and celebrating. There has to be room for that in this modern day. We have so much incredible opportunities, right? Like wicked bands that we can go see, parties, like we want to be part of the culture and part of the celebration and part of indulging in like the crazy foods that crazy chefs are making, and these traditional forms of healing are not about restricting yourself from those things, but they are very much about understanding what a healthy balance is with those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because I mean, you can fight your circadian rhythm all you want, but the sun's still going to rise and the sun's still going to set. So you're either going to go with the flow of nature or you're going to go against it. It's really actually quite simple.
Yeah. And from a historical perspective, society has only been going against circadian rhythms for a very, 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 very short amount of time. Yeah. And it will not last.
It won't. And even, I mean, I always take studies with a bit of a grain of salt, because sometimes I think that it's all about the question that you're asking, right? But there's so many studies. There's so many studies on lack of sleep, on staying up all night, and all of those kinds of things, on like not eating too much sugar, right? Not doing like fasting and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's so many studies on how much it affects every aspect of our life. Mm-hmm. So, it's too bad that science takes a while to catch up to like common sense, in my opinion, but yeah, the nature of the beast. But
I think that they should have a television show about it, like a sitcom.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me of when I was a teenager, the coolest show on television was that 70s show. And it was a bunch of teenagers smoking pot in their basement. And so what was I doing every night?
Yep.
Smoking pot. And so, fast forward a couple of decades and I have, teenage cousins. And what are they doing? They're watching Big Bang Theory and getting straight A's in high school.
Oh my God, really? That's amazing.
Because that's what's on trend, is to be smart now.
Yeah, it's true.
So we can step into the light here and become part of this trend where the new normal is the old normal. And it's cool to be a modern guru.
Yeah. Of your own life, yeah.
Yeah. If you go to Choices or any of the natural food grocers that have that Alive magazine, like on every page, they're talking about Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and these old healing modalities.
And there's a reason that they have sustained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there's value in thinking about what was normal for you growing up, mm-hmm. and what you would like to see shifted for yourself moving forward, or for your children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because what are we perpetuating? We get to choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
My children have learned the art of self-massage, and it is like the most beautiful thing to see that that's normal for them. That couple, 2 or 3 times a week, we huddle in the bathroom on the floor, naked on towels. My kids are just really little.
Yeah.
And we rub ourselves with oil, and they think that's totally normal.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I know my daughter, she sees like naturopath, acupuncture, chiro. She's grown up in this world. And it's amazing to me because we can take for granted that that's just normal. And I think she can too. But when her friends come over, I mean, she's 19 now, so her friends don't come over a lot. But they're like, what? You do what? Acupuncture? Like, that's so weird, you know? But it's so normal for her. And I'm so grateful that that's her go-to. Like her go-to is always to go to the alternatives first, and then she'll go to the medical. And she kind of has an understanding of what she can get from each one or what, each one will provide for her. So
yeah,
it's
so fascinating. So cool to watch in someone else. So, and then speaking further to that, like, so you've been in this transition, or like 5 years ago, from being this extrovert or maybe overdoing it, going out, whatnot. And in making the shift to focusing more on self, what effect did that have on your friends, or on your core group?
That's a good question. And I should say, I've actually been working at this for probably closer to about 15 years. I used to, and it's an evolution because I was just completely insane for a period of my life and just doing everything and never taking a moment to stop. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It has created tension without a doubt. Some people, some relationships who value this, no issue whatsoever there. And it's wonderful because it gives them and then an opportunity to just be free and spacious with that too, to be like, hey, you know what? I'm actually really feeling like I just need a night in. I know we made a plan, we kind of can have a conversation about that. And there's no weirdness in the space. And some people who, they really need that. They really need that connection with other people. And I need connection with other people without a doubt. But there's maybe not as much emphasis on that relationship to self and taking quiet time. It's been tense. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. And I think the thing that can get challenging is to hold that tension. So for myself, holding the tension, because a lot of my sort of core fractures, if you will, are around belonging and making sure people like me. So I will like morph into what I think people want so that they're like, oh my God, Paula, she's amazing, And that's how I've received a lot of validation. So cutting that behavior out, not cutting it out, actually, I've had to transform it. It's been like an ongoing thing.
Of course.
That's, it's really been, there it was. It's really been meeting those moments and holding that tension. And in those tense moments, because those, of course, are the moments of transformation, this saying, what is going to nourish you here? Like, you can't change the way somebody else feels. You can't change the way they're responding to you, reacting to you. You can be open to having a conversation around it, but all you can do is honor yourself. Because and I've learned this the hard way, unfortunately, is that when you don't honor the relationship to yourself, you're screwed. Like, you are screwed if that's the way that you exist in life. You are constantly going to be doing things for other people, and you're going to be exhausted. And that was absolutely the road I was heading down. So
Yeah.
It's been challenging. It's been really challenging for certain relationships. And in fact, I've had a couple of really close friendships that I never imagined not having in my life that reached a very natural conclusion because of it. So, and they reached a natural conclusion. And I say that because I actually have no turmoil over them. I felt like the whole relationship and the death of the relationship was honored the entire way through. But I mean, had you told me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, I'm not getting into doing this work. No way. I'm not getting into honoring myself. I can't imagine my life without you. Yeah. But
you're right though. From the surface, it's easy to say, well, when you think about it that way, like, this is my whole life. So how long am I going to put my needs or my desires on hold at the cost of somebody else? Well, of course I'm not. But when you're in it, we default to old patterns, we default to old comforts. And often that's the comfort of hanging out with that same person who gets us into the same trouble that we were in last weekend.
That's exactly it. So it really takes, I think, getting honest with yourself about what is it that you're actually What part of you is actually engaging in this relationship? And those can be really hard questions to answer, because I know a lot of people say, well, I just, I care for people. I want to be there for people. And they say all these things, but I'm like, but what about being there for your own relationship with yourself? Like, that has to be number one. And people think that that's selfish, but it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cliche, but it truly is the most important relationship that you have in your life. And when you have that, and that's very steadfast in your life, you're able to give and receive it's just a flow. It's not even something that you have to think about. Well, what am I getting from this person? What am I receiving? How am I feeling? You just are naturally in the flow of that when you're consistently honoring yourself.
So much less exhausting.
Well, that's the thing. One of the big things for me, and I'm so thankful to have Chinese medicine, because I know that this philosophy is a way to live. And it's, of course, been I've been studying it for about 17 years now, and it's just a continual embodiment of it. But if I truly believe those philosophies, then I have to apply them to myself. And if that's the case, then energy, it cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So nobody can actually take my energy. No one has that power. And I actually can't give or take anybody's energy either. It's a constant flow. It's just, and if you're not feeling that, then the question becomes, where in your life are you blocked?
Mm-hmm.
The same way with the physiology, when the yang is moving through the body, if it's showing up as pathology, where are you blocked?
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, emotionally, psychically, all of that stuff.
Well, and I had mentioned there were two things that came up between the two of us, and this was the other thing, is my stagnant chi, my stagnant prana, my stagnant life force. And then you said, most of my clients have that. And so can you just speak for a second about like what that is and what it means?
Yeah. It can really manifest differently depending on what organ system or element it's manifesting in. So in the case of the liver, all of the elements have a certain behavior and a certain sort of spiritual, virtuous, thing to them, an element to them, aspect to them. So in the case of the liver wants to move forward, right? So it spreads that chi in all directions and it wants to move forward, and it's related to the eyes. So it holds the vision of our potential and our purpose. So that's what it does. So when when we have stagnant energy within the wood element, within the liver, that can show up, that stifling shows up when things aren't going our way, right? So we have a vision of how we want it to go, but life is life. It throws up obstacles, right? And we're like, this, I'm like pushing through. I'm going to do it. It has to be my way. It has to be my way. So one of the things with the liver is being right. It has to be right. So the virtue, though, is benevolence. It's recognizing its kindness. It's recognizing that everybody has a different truth, but we also have this collective truth that we also have to be a part of, right? And the universe isn't there to mess with you. It's just about finding creative ways around those obstacles. So the liver is springtime. It's all that creative kind of sprouting, bursting energy. So it can be very like, rah, which is great because it transforms energy and it also moves things forward. But when it's stagnant, when its growth feels stifled, we have stagnant energy and show up in our body.
Okay, and so this can apply to any organ function, and that becomes like a different manifestation of a different element with different side effects.
Yeah.
So for anyone interested in like the basics of Chinese medicine and the elements and what your element is, what is it called? Your
constitutional factor.
Your constitutional factor. So Paula has this beautiful program where you can find out your constitutional factor, and like I'm telling you, she's going through these points that every single thing she's saying, I'm like, yep, that's me, yep, check that box, yep, like it's just like I found with Ayurveda, this is gaining a deeper understanding of yourself, of your physiology, of how your body connects with your mind, and how to just fuel your fire in the right way, cool your jets when required, and how to really support yourself And what I found is using this knowledge, when we can find this knowledge, then it can become something so simple. Like for me, with liver aggravation, like something as simple as eating more beets is cooling and soothing to me, and detoxifying for me.
Totally. Exercise.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So you can and refine exactly what your supports are, which I think is so much more interesting than like opening up a Chatelaine magazine and subscribing to, whatever, like keto diets. Or I know that you're on a keto diet right now, so I thought I would talk to you about it. But
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
And they definitely serve a purpose. But it's easy for our culture to just subscribe to whatever everybody's doing, and that's not necessarily the thing that you should be doing for your constitution, whether it's in Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine. So tell us about your program.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
It's 6 modules. So each week we go, the first week is the basics of Chinese medicine, and it's Chinese medicine and essential oils. So I love plants so dearly, and I love herbal medicine. I love blending it. I love essential oils. And so I really wanted to have a way to kind of bring Chinese medicine and all the concepts that we're talking about in a really practical way, so that people will also learn where to apply essential oils and a little bit about essential oils. And it's all according to Chinese medicine. So first week is talking a bit about plant medicine basics, and then each week after that, so the 5 weeks after that, we go into each element. So there's 5 elements in Chinese medicine, excuse me, and we go much more into detail in a lot of the same way that we've just talked about in this whatever, it's been past half an hour or something like that. So we talk about the mental, emotional, and the physical, and the physiological, and the whole thing. Because my experience is exactly that, is one of the reasons I love it and connect to it so much is understanding my constitution. That it was just sort of going to be a weakness. I'm even hesitant to use that word. It was going to be a place that I was going to have to be mindful of. But what really was helpful was recognizing when I'm under stress, where do I go? And I was so, just like how you were saying, how you resonate so much with the wood, so much resonance with the fire, and feeling alone and feeling like I didn't belong and all of those kinds of things. So that I started to really get to know, okay, I'm in ego space right now. And when I'm in ego space, whatever I'm going to do is likely not going to serve me. So I could just kind of take a breath and sort of reflect on that. And again, I mean, it's been a total evolution. It's been years and years and that I've been mindful of that kind of stuff. But I find it really beneficial for people. So we do talk a lot about that kind of stuff. And then each week there's a couple oils that we introduce that will help to support that element as well. And acupuncture points. And it's just the beginning. I have so many ideas and I want to go so far and so deep with people, but it was, hopefully it'll be a good taster and people will get more interested in the community, sort of like what you're doing,
And I really commend you for setting it up in this way that is accessible via something that's already something people are interested in, which is this world of essential oils. And essential oils are much more powerful than we think. And they have so many applications that are quite specific. And I took Paula's course and it was fabulous. And just like how the beets are supportive, it's so simple to just take an essential oil and put it on a certain spot, just 2 fingers above my ankle, and it
nice,
heals my liver, right? So,
and also teaching about the respectful use of plants and being in relationship with plants.
Yes.
You don't need 10 oils in your diffuser. You really, especially with things like oils, you need 3 to 5 things, and that's it. 5 I think is even a bit much. 3. You don't want to do more than that, because the body has to process it actually through your liver. And that is too much of that stuff. It's just like having an environmental toxin, and no essential oils are not toxic, but too much of anything that your liver has to process is going to weaken your system, And so we just take all this stuff and all these supplements and all, I just want to completely debunk all of that stuff that you don't need that. So if you're actually in relationship with the plant, you can start to really tune into what it is that your body is wanting,
Yeah.
but also how the plant is wanting to be there also, you know. So like, how is the plant changed by its interaction with you, and how are you changed by your interaction with it? So I really want to, like, that sacred relationship is very important to me as well.
Yes, we're very much living in symbiosis with the plants of this world. They're keeping us alive. We're keeping them alive.
Yeah.
It's a divine relationship.
More than anybody thinks they are. They're kind of running the show in a lot of ways, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I have to speak to my experience with having migraines, and more recently, I did have a flare-up of migraines. I've done research on the best quality essential oils. I have obtained the best that I can possibly get in my ecosystem, and putting them in the diffuser too much sent me into a migraine because my body's trying to process too much. So I was probably putting too many drops in, or just doing it too often, or it's just not something that, like, I need some kind of detox or other kind of support before I can process that.
Yeah, or maybe you just need one oil, you know?
Yeah, I only do stick to one, but totally, it's,
yeah,
they are more powerful than you think.
Yeah, I agree. I actually have a client who, I don't know if you remember me telling you the story, and I won't go into the whole thing, but she's got autoimmune hepatitis. And anyway, so she took the first course that I did in the one for you guys. And anyway, she had a really wonderful experience with Cyprus, actually. And again, I won't go into all the details, but I saw her about a month or two ago, and she was saying, "Oh my God, Paula, this woman," I went over to her house, and she had just gotten her pack from, I don't know, doTERRA Young Living or something like that. And she was like, "Let's put this in. This is good for this. This is good for this." And she was just like, "I was just thinking about you, and oh my gosh." And she went home and had a flare up. And for her, her symptoms are very, very severe, having this disorder and stuff like that. But it was, again, a lesson of just like, yeah, just keep it simple. You don't need to just be trying to, like, combat every single symptom that you're experiencing in your life. You get to the pattern, you understand the underlying physiology in the pattern, and that's it. It's very simple.
It's funny because earlier you mentioned the history of traditional Chinese medicine and how it became more westernized and more masculine, right? More of a prescriptive nature. And same thing happened with Ayurveda.
Oh,
when the British came into India, they sort of took away the spiritual roots of Ayurveda and made it a very, like, descriptive, like, pathology based.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I almost feel like that's what's happening with essential oils right now. It's like, here's your guide, here's the applications, but at the same time, it's, I mean, I so appreciate the education that a lot of oil representatives have and have access to. And if you do represent an oil company, then definitely take advantage of the education, because there is education there. Absolutely. And I think that there's value in, like, stepping back and assessing whether they are always applicable to every situation.
Well, that's the thing. Like, how many oils are there for calming the nervous system? I don't know. I'm going to guess like 10, 15, 20, 30. You know, all of those to calm your nervous system. It's ridiculous, right? So I think one of the things to be said too is that it's really important to understand the system. And I think this is where a lot of the stuff is getting skewed, is that people are saying they're taking anecdotal experience from a friend or their own experience, not understanding how it's actually working in the body, and saying, "Oh, you have this, we'll take this."
Yes.
That's not really being respectful to medicine. And I understand it. People get excited about things and they want to share them, and that's wonderful. But I think we just need to have a lot more respect for the actual plant itself and the symbiotic relationship between us and our environment. You know, because really, if you find the right remedy, it's the same in homeopathy. It's the same, I'm sure, with Ayurveda as well as Chinese medicine. If you find the right remedy and you diagnose that properly, and that's where a lot of people, I think, get tripped up, is that they don't necessarily understand a system, like a medical model. And if you don't, then you should just be where you're at, and you shouldn't be trying to diagnose and quell people's symptoms. You know, I see that a lot, and it's yeah. I'm always like, no, please don't do that. But, you know, people learn the way that they learn and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, so my fascination with this program that you offer is that it allows you to get an understanding of how essential oils can be applied to whatever your root cause is. It's not treating the symptom, which is what Western medicine has taught us to do. It's assessing what's underlying, and then learning what can benefit you and your constitutional factors. So I really appreciate having that additional layer of understanding.
Yeah, I think it's just so important, because I'm same as you. Like, I feel like that's what I see is just a lot of symptom care with essential oils, and there's just so much more potential, you know, and for me, it's just so much more exciting to tap into that potential of like, how are they actually working? What are they doing? What's their movement in the body? And so, like with the Chinese medicine, we talk about the energetics of them, and that's how we understand how they work in the body, as opposed to like more westernized, it's chemotype. You know, that's fine too, but it's about the flavor and the aroma, and which direction do they take, and which organs are they do they have more of an affinity to. And it's nice because I think it's understandable for people, you know, when it's just kind of broken down into those simplistic terms, and then just start to experiment just with yourself, you know, not necessarily with other people. I mean, obviously it's human nature. We want to talk about it, which is great, and we want to share it, do all of that, and we can learn through other people, absolutely. But it's a really nice way to get into relationship with yourself and the plants. Yeah.
Which I think that's just a beautiful bridge back to like our topic of conversation of this, using essential oils as a vehicle to spark a deeper relationship with yourself, and that supports this curiosity about yourself, which supports creating, you know, a healthy relationship or healthy boundaries with yourself. And just getting more interested in what's going on in here and less interested in what's going on out there. And that's where it's at, you guys. When you get fascinated about your bodies and like what foods and what oils and what relationships feed me, feed my growth, feed my evolution, we're not sedentary. We are forever evolving. We're forever changing. And it's getting so much more interesting.
Yeah.
So boo to stagnancy, boo to just getting to a point where, I go out every weekend, I drink till 11, I watch Netflix every night, like boring. I want to know all about my energy levels and all about what makes me the most clear and most focused and most alive in this one and only life.
Yeah.
I don't have time for.
Found too is I remember sort of when I really started applying these things to my life, I would get really frustrated because I still felt those pulls to do those things, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I know better. What am I doing? And I would beat myself up and shame myself and do the whole thing. And the more I recognize that it's not going to be immediate. It literally, that's why they call it practice, right? You literally just have to every single day be mindful and do your best for yourself. Don't just say, oh, I'm doing my best. You have to have your own integrity, and you have to say like, actually, I'm doing my best. And if you're not doing your best that day, be honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
Very, very important, you know?
Yeah.
And what I found though is over time and cultivating that relationship with myself, it is much more spontaneous for me to want to read a book or to want to go out in nature and hike, as opposed to going out and drinking or going and doing Netflix. And I still do those things, absolutely.
Of course.
So much more harmony within it, but it took time. And it takes time. Like, I'm going to be cultivating this for the rest of my life, but it does get easier.
Yeah.
It really does if you just stick with it, you know.
Absolutely. And self-compassion for the win, right? That's that Buddhist theory of the second arrow, right? We do the thing that's out of alignment, and then we guilt ourselves. It's like kicking yourself when you're down. That's just not required. We can choose to have compassion, and when you do have when you can create a pattern of each morning starting your day with an intention of, you know, what would make me feel awesome today, what would best serve me today,
Yeah.
And
lying on the couch watching Netflix, like honestly, authentically.
Yeah, we fully embrace it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Did you read Pema Chodron?
I know her, yes.
Love her. I haven't read her stuff in years, but I was very into her about 15 years ago. And I think, I can't remember which book it was, maybe The Places That Scare You.
Mm.
I remember this one piece, I'll never forget this, because she was talking about being a warrior and kind of like doing this stuff and knowing and being authentic with yourself. And she said, sometimes being a warrior is knowing when you can't be a warrior. Yeah. And I don't love the word warrior, the whole thing, but nonetheless, the intention is there. And it sort of allowed me to just be like, okay, it's okay to not be perfect, which is just anyways. But
well, and to say, like, what if watching TV this afternoon or this evening, what if that made me feel really good?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you hear in your subconscious or in the back of your mind thinking like, no, that you shouldn't do that, listen.
Yeah.
Ask your body.
Yeah.
What do we want to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're right. Like I totally agree with what you said. Like, it's practice, you guys. It's just lather, rinse, repeat.
It really does get easier. Like it really does. And I know for myself, for years, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, is this even, everybody says, oh, do all this stuff and, you'll feel better and all that kind of thing. And I think, though, actually, if I can say something about that, one of the other things for me was recognizing that it's not about feeling better. It's just about feeling life. So whatever is arising, because I had this fixation. I had a lot of trauma growing up, and I felt very traumatized growing up, and I was suicidal for a period of my life and all of that kind of thing. And so I had this thing where I would compare myself to other people who always seemed so happy. And then, this is all pre-social media even. And I felt bad. I felt like bad for myself. I felt like, what's wrong with me that I'm not happy all the time? So I created this thing where happiness was the goal. Mm-hmm. And letting go of that was one of the best things I ever did in my life. I did it probably about 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And just literally feeling whatever is arising and not shutting off to life, like not shutting off to, well, today you feel like a piece of shit. Okay. What does that feel like? Where am I noticing that in my body? I'm sorry, I'm swearing so much. I hope that your people...
They're adults.
Okay. But where am I feeling that in my body, and what does it make me feel like to feel that? And really just tending to the emotions as they arise, and not making the point of even tending to them, getting out of it. It was just feel it. Because and then all of those philosophies of like, well, it's all impermanent, it ebb and flow, all of those really started to make a lot more sense. But that fixation on happiness and feeling better, I think it is a disease of our time, quite honestly. It is terrible, and it puts so much pressure on, well, what if I'm feeling crappy today? What if I want to just watch Netflix because I just need to rest my body, and I want to like zone out to some beautiful movie or something like that, or what if I'm not feeling like the person feels like or looks like they feel like on Instagram or Facebook, like it's not the point. Being happy is not the point. No, it's being able to feel all of the emotions as they arise, the happiness, the sadness, the grief, the fear, all of it, and be equanimous with it. So that's been
so beautiful. This is you are speaking our language. This is the theme of my group, is learning how to feel your feelings.
Perfect.
Not distracting.
Yeah.
And I even think that just connects back to this whole Western like medical system assessing, you have this symptom, you're sad, take this chocolate, you'll be happy.
Yeah.
It's removing us from this feminine form of the flow of emotion.
Yeah, and the mystery and the unknown, and that's what creates stagnancy, right? Is we shut ourselves off, and when we shut ourselves off, we say, okay, this piece of myself, this is not okay. I'm going to put this over here. Then it becomes this dark lurking shadow. That's the thing that might be in the back of your head when you're watching Netflix. And that piece of you is saying, well, no, you should probably get out in nature because that's actually going to nourish you. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that because then that means I'll have to deal with something or whatever. It's wild. It's completely wild. So that's awesome that you're doing that in your program. I think that's a really big key to just health in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been super supportive to have a group mentality around it, and just continue. We work to remind each other that it's okay to start again. It's okay to start small. It's okay to just ask yourself over again, what is my body asking for today?
And being honest with like the kind of person that you are. I know with my clients, I'll say, I usually get a pretty good idea by the end of my initial consult with them as to whether or not they're going to be like fully take things on, or if they're like, oh no, you need one step at a time, right? And we'll have that conversation, right? And there's no judgment one way or another. And I think it's just supporting them in, it's okay if you just do one thing. That's fine, right? For some people, I find, especially people who are Earth Constitution, which would be, well, I don't want to say too much about Ayurveda because I really don't know, but I know that they're more kind of kapha. I don't know what necessarily behaviors and the mental emotions are around that, so I won't speak to that by any means, but their thing is food. That's how they, that's where they go when they're stressed, is to food. And because we have to consume food every single day to stay alive, it's not like smoking or drinking where you can really make a choice, and if you don't have that thing, you're going to be fine. With food, you have to eat every day, so there's such an emotional connection to that,
Yeah.
And those constitutional people, they also move very slowly. So I'm always like, just pick one thing out of all the things that you could do, pick one thing. And usually we'll kind of have a conversation and figure out what might be the most important or the most impactful one for them to work on at that point. And that can take months.
Yeah.
Months, but they just move at a slower rate. Where someone who's fire like myself, I'm like, no, give it to me. Let's go. I can do this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah. And for us, it's like, you can slow down. Yeah. I just think it's so beautiful again that these traditions and these modalities honor these differences in our mental types and our body types. It's just such a self-loving process. And so if you have been interested in the content that you've learned on Ayurveda, and you want to know what else is going on in the world, Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine are super intertwined, like so many overlaps, and it's such a beautiful thing to have combined knowledge on. So where do people find you, Paula, if they want to see?
Yeah, my website is the best, drpaulawoodward.com. So that's drpaulawoodward.com.
The best, drpaulawoodward.com. That's amazing.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
I'll share that link as well.
That's the best place. And you can find everything like the courses, just about me, booking, all of that kind of stuff if you want that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today. I'm so excited to share it with everybody.
Yay! Hi, everyone. And thanks for listening.
If you have any questions, you can let me know. I can get you in touch with Paula, and I'll make sure everybody gets the link to your website as well. But everyone, just keep on keeping on, and get more interested in you and less interested in everyone else.
Yeah, mind your own business. That's what I like to say. Mind your own business.
If you're not full of yourself, who are you full of?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.